I was walking down the street when I noticed a sleek, glossy Lamborghini parked near the curb. The deep metallic shine of the car caught my eye, and I couldn't help but stop and admire its beauty. The engine was quiet, but the powerful aura of the car spoke volumes. I could see a well-dressed man standing next to it, leaning on the side, clearly frustrated. His face showed a mixture of anger and desperation. He seemed to be cursing under his breath as he fiddled with the keys in his hand, trying to unlock the door. The man was pacing around the car, muttering to himself. I overheard fragments of his words, something about how he couldn't afford to keep the car anymore, how everything in his life had gone wrong, and how he was running out of options. He looked like he was in his late 30s, well-groomed, wearing a tailored suit, but his expressions betrayed an inner turmoil that didn't match his outer appearance. I continued watching from a distance, unsure whether to approach him. But before I could make up my mind, a figure appeared from the corner of my eye. A man, dressed in simple clothes and nothing flashy, approached the Lamborghini with slow, deliberate steps. His presence seemed out of place at first, especially considering the lavish car, but there was something calm about his demeanor. His dark skin glistened in the sunlight, and he moved with an air of confidence that made him stand out. The man stopped just a few feet away from the frustrated one and observed him for a while, almost as if he was studying him. The man in the suit, clearly irritated, looked at him with annoyance. "Hey, can you get lost?" he snapped, clearly not in the mood for any company. "This is private property." The stranger simply smiled and shook his head. "It's all right, man. I'm not here to cause trouble." At this, the man in the suit's face hardened even more, as if he had reached his breaking point. "What do you want?" "I'm not in the mood for small talk. Can't you see that I'm dealing with something important here?" The stranger took a step closer, still calm, his voice soft but firm. "I know you're having a hard time, but trust me, things will work out." The man in the suit let out an exasperated sigh, clearly not interested in hearing any advice. "What do you know about my life? What do you know about hardship?" He threw his hands up in the air. "You probably don't even know what it's like to lose everything." The stranger raised an eyebrow, but his smile didn't fade. "You'd be surprised." The conversation seemed to have reached a point of tension, with neither man willing to back down. I stood there, unsure of whether I should intervene, but just as the situation felt like it might escalate, the stranger calmly reached into his pocket and pulled out a key fob. It was black and sleek, similar to the one the man in the suit had been holding, but this one seemed different. The stranger pressed a button on the fob, and to my amazement, the Lamborghini's lights flashed, signaling that the car was unlocked. The man in the suit stopped in his tracks, staring at the stranger. His face turned pale, and for a moment, he couldn't speak. What did you just do?" His voice was trembling now, as if he was in shock. The stranger looked at him and smiled. "This car broken bar, it's mine." For a moment, the world seemed to stop. The man in the suit blinked rapidly, as if processing the words that had just been said. He looked back at the Lamborghini, then back at the stranger. It was clear that he didn't know how to react. You own this car?" The words came out in disbelief, almost like a whisper. The stranger nodded, still calm, still unfazed. "I do, and it's not just the car, it's everything that comes with it. The life, the work, the hustle. I didn't get here by complaining or blaming anyone." The man in the suit stood there, speechless, his face flushed with embarrassment as he slowly realized that he had misjudged the stranger. He had assumed that the man was just some passerby, someone with no connection to the world of luxury and success. But now, it seemed, everything had turned upside down. The stranger, without another word, stepped toward the Lamborghini and smoothly slid into the driver's seat. As he adjusted the rearview mirror, he glanced at the man in the suit. "Sometimes," he said, his voice calm but with a touch of wisdom, "it's not about what you own, it's about how you carry yourself and how you face challenges." The man in the suit seemed lost in thought, his eyes still fixed on the car, then on the stranger. It was clear that this encounter had shaken him, perhaps even changed his perspective. The stranger revved the engine, and the sound of the Lamborghini roared to life. With one last look at the man who had been so full of anger and frustration just moments before, the stranger pulled away, leaving the man standing there, his mouth agape, watching the Lamborghini disappear down the street. It was a moment of silent realization for the man in the suit, and I couldn't help but wonder what was going through his mind. What would he do next? Would he continue to let his frustration and anger rule his life, or would this unexpected encounter lead him to change? I didn't know, but one thing was certain: the stranger had left more than just a car behind. He had left a lesson. As the Lamborghini disappeared around the corner, the man in the suit stood frozen for a moment, his gaze still lingering in the direction where the car had vanished. His hands, which had been trembling with frustration just moments earlier, were now clenched tightly at his sides. He seemed to be battling with a storm of thoughts, trying to process everything that had just unfolded. The calmness of the stranger's words echoed in his mind, almost like a quiet whisper in the wind. Sometimes, it's not about what you own, it's about how you carry yourself and how you face challenges. The words replayed over and over, resonating within him. It wasn't just the Lamborghini that left an impression, but the calm confidence, the assurance in the stranger's demeanor, and the wisdom that seemed to be embedded in every word. For the first time in a long while, the man in the suit felt something stir inside him, a shift. He could feel the anger that had consumed him, the frustration that had clouded his judgment, begin to fade away. He took a deep breath, trying to regain some composure. As he exhaled, his eyes scanned the street, the same street that had once felt like a battleground. He had been so caught up in the pressures of his own life, in the materialistic desires and the endless chase for success, that he had lost sight of the most important things. The stranger had reminded him of something he had long forgotten, that peace, self-assurance, and resilience came not from the things you owned, but from how you carried yourself, how you faced the hardships of life, and how you learned from them. The man looked at the Lamborghini again, the shiny exterior now seeming less important. It was just a car, an object of status, something that could easily come and go. But the lesson he had just learned wasn't something that could be bought or replaced. It was something far deeper. He realized that his recent frustration, his fears about losing everything, stemmed from a place of insecurity and a misguided belief that success was all about possessions. Slowly, the man began to walk away from the car, his steps deliberate and measured. For the first time in weeks, his thoughts were clear. It didn't matter if he lost the Lamborghini or any of the other material things that he had accumulated over the years. What mattered more was how he dealt with the situation, how he stood up, took responsibility, and moved forward. The stranger hadn't just taught him about ownership, he had taught him about strength, resilience, and perspective. As he walked, the man found himself thinking about his life. He had spent so much time chasing after things, a wealth, status, recognition, that he had neglected the things that truly brought happiness: his relationships, his peace of mind, and his personal growth. The constant pressure to have more, to be more, had only led to burnout and dissatisfaction. But now, in the quiet after the stranger's departure, he realized something crucial. He could start over. He didn't need to be defined by his possessions or the failures he thought defined him. He could rebuild, but this time, with a new understanding, a new mindset. As the sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting a golden hue across the street, the man in the suit finally took out his phone. He dialed a number he hadn't called in months, his old friend, someone he had distanced himself from due to his obsession with work and wealth. It took a few rings before the familiar voice answered. "Hey, it's me," he said, his tone softer than it had been in a long time. "I think I've been lost, but I'm ready to make things right. Let's talk." The conversation that followed was long and emotional, filled with apologies, explanations, and promises to rebuild the friendships and relationships he had neglected. For the first time in a while, the man felt lighter. It was as though the burden he had carried around, this constant pressure to succeed at any cost, was starting to lift. As the night crept in and the lights of the city flickered to life, the man in the suit felt a sense of peace he hadn't experienced in years. He knew that the road ahead would not be easy, rebuilding would take time, and he would undoubtedly face challenges. But for the first time, he wasn't afraid of what was to come. He wasn't afraid to let go of the material things that had once defined him. As he sat down in a nearby cafe, copyright, sipping his coffee, He couldn't help but smile at the thought of the stranger in the Lamborghini. He didn't know who he was or where he had come from, but that encounter had changed him in ways he couldn't quite explain. The stranger had left more than just the car behind. He had left a lasting impact, a lesson about true strength, about finding inner peace, and about not letting external circumstances define who you were. And as the man looked out at the city skyline, a sense of gratitude washed over him. He knew that from now on, he would face life's challenges with a different perspective, a more balanced, more grounded perspective. And that, he realized, was the true path to success. The man in the suit sat back in his chair, the warm glow of the cafe copyright test dim lighting casting shadows on his face. As he reflected on the stranger's words, the feeling of change within him began to take deeper root. The Lamborghini, the wealth, the frustration, all of it now felt distant, like a chapter from another life. He knew the path he had been on had been flawed, built on a foundation of external validation and fleeting achievements. But now, something new was stirring within him, a desire for something more meaningful. He finished his coffee and stood up, walking out of the cafe copyright with a renewed sense of purpose. The city around him seemed different now, less overwhelming, more like a place full of potential rather than a battleground to be conquered. As he walked through the streets, he noticed things he had once ignored in the faces of people, the quiet beauty of the evening sky, the soft hum of life moving around him. He realized how much he had been blind to before, consumed by his own ambitions and insecurities. His thoughts drifted back to the encounter with the stranger. It had been brief, but in those few minutes, the stranger had managed to teach him more than anyone had in years. There had been no judgment in the man's eyes, no arrogance in his tone, just calm, quiet wisdom. It was as if the stranger knew something about life that the man in the suit had yet to understand, a truth that couldn't be found in the pursuit of material wealth, but in the way one navigated the storm of life. The next morning, the man woke up with a new clarity. He went about his usual routine but with a different mindset. Instead of immediately diving into his work and emails, he spent some time reflecting. He took a walk in the park, noticing the small details he had never paid attention to before. He called his family, something he hadn't done in months, and for the first time in a long while, he really listened to them. He heard the laughter in his sister's voice, the warmth in his parents' words. He found himself smiling more, genuinely, without the weight of expectation holding him down. The following weeks were a process of redefinition. He let go of some of his material possessions, not out of some grand gesture but as an acknowledgement that they didn't define him. He sold the high-end watch he had cherished for years, the one he thought made him feel successful. He cleaned out his wardrobe, donating clothes he no longer needed. Slowly but surely, he let go of the things that were tied to his past, things that had been weighing him down without him even realizing it. He made a conscious effort to rebuild his relationships, to connect with people not for what they could offer him, but for who they were. He rekindled friendships he had neglected, apologized to those he had wronged, and began to understand the importance of empathy, kindness, and humility. It wasn't easy, but it was freeing. Each step he took was a step closer to the person he wanted to be, the person who didn't need to rely on possessions or status to feel whole. One day, as he was walking down the same street where he had met the stranger, he noticed a familiar figure standing by the Lamborghini, the same sleek car, the same calm demeanor. The stranger was leaning against it, smiling softly as if he had been waiting for this moment. The man in the suit approached him, a sense of gratitude filling his chest. "You a broken bar," he began, his voice filled with emotion. "You were right. Everything used to broken bar, it's all been true. I don't know how to thank you for what you've done, for showing me that there's more to life than just the chase for success." The stranger's smile remained unchanged. He shook his head gently. "I didn't do anything. I just reminded you of what you already knew." Somewhere deep inside, the man looked at the Lamborghini, then back at the stranger. "I thought I needed all of this." He gestured to the car. "I thought this would bring me happiness, success, fulfillment. But I was wrong. I see now that happiness comes from within. It comes from how you carry yourself, how you face life, how you connect with others." The stranger nodded, his eyes warm and understanding. "Exactly. The car is just a tool. a reflection of what you choose to focus on. The real wealth is in how you live your life, how you treat people, and how you find peace within yourself. The man took a deep breath, a feeling of peace washing over him. He had come full circle. The anger, the frustration, the obsession with success, they were all things of the past. He had discovered something far more valuable than any material possession, the ability to live a life of authenticity, humility, and inner peace. "I've been looking at life all wrong," he said quietly, almost to himself. "But I think I'm finally starting to see things clearly." The stranger smiled again, his eyes filled with a knowing warmth. "Good," he said simply. "Just keep walking forward. Life will show you the way." As the man walked away from the stranger, he felt lighter than he ever had before. The Lamborghini, the material wealth, the desire to prove himself, all of it had faded into the background. He had learned that true success wasn't about what you had, but about who you were and how you lived. The journey ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, he felt ready to embrace it. And somewhere, in the distance, the sound of a car engine revving softly in the background was a reminder that the real journey had only just begun. Days turned into weeks, and the man continued to walk the path of transformation with a quiet but steadfast determination. He had started making small changes in his daily life, but each step felt more authentic, more true to who he had always wanted to be. His work, once an overwhelming obsession, now took a backseat to the relationships he was nurturing, the personal growth he was cultivating, and the new perspective he had gained on what truly mattered. Decision to let go of his need for external validation had not been easy, but it was liberating. He still faced moments of doubt when the pressures of life or the lure of his old ambitions crept back into his mind, but he had learned how to recognize them and let them pass without getting swept away. His mind had become clearer, his heart lighter. One evening, after finishing a long day of work, the man found himself once again walking through the same part of the city. The night was cool, the streets bathed in soft streetlight, and he noticed something he hadn't seen before. The people around him seemed more alive, more real. The hurried office workers, the couples laughing together on benches, the elderly man feeding pigeons, everything seemed to have a deeper meaning now, as if life itself had become richer, more vivid. He remembered a time when he had walked these same streets with blinders on, focused only on the next deal, the next car, the next promotion. The idea of enjoying the present moment had seemed foreign then, as though everything was a race towards some future goal that would bring ultimate fulfillment. But now, he understood that the moments in between, the small, seemingly insignificant ones, were where true happiness was hidden. That night, he found himself standing at the same cafe copyright where he had once sat after his encounter with the stranger. It was a quiet, peaceful place, with the soft hum of conversation blending with the sound of clinking cups. He walked inside and ordered a cup of coffee, then took a seat by the window. As he sipped his drink, he looked out at the world passing by, realizing that he had finally found something he hadn't known he was searching for: contentment. It was then that he spotted someone across the cafe copyright. The figure was familiar. He hadn't seen the stranger in weeks, but there he was, sitting at the same corner table, his calm demeanor unchanged. The man in the suit felt a quiet rush of gratitude stir within him. Without thinking, he stood up and walked over. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, his voice softer than before. The stranger looked up, his eyes lighting up with recognition, and gestured to the empty chair across from him. "Of course. I'm glad you came." They sat in silence for a few moments, each lost in their thoughts, before the man in the suit spoke. "I've been thinking about everything that happened. About what used to broken bar, about how life isn't about what we own, but how we carry ourselves." He paused, taking a breath. "It's been hard, but it's been worth it. I feel a broken bar lighter, more at peace than I ever have before." The stranger smiled, his expression warm and understanding. "It's a journey, not a destination. You've done the hard work of facing the truth about yourself. The rest is just living it out, day by day." The man nodded slowly. "I've let go of so much broken bar, things I thought I needed to feel successful. And, For the first time, I feel like I'm finally on the right path. I'm rebuilding relationships that I neglected, connecting with people who matter. I've even started focusing on the work I truly care about, not just what brings in the most money, but what makes me feel fulfilled. The stranger took a sip of his coffee, nodding. That's good to hear. It's easy to get caught up in the expectations of others, and the idea that success is about what's visible on the outside. But real success is about who you are, what you give to the world, and how you treat others. The man leaned back in his chair, the weight of those words sinking in. He looked at the stranger, finally understanding that the lessons he had learned from this unexpected meeting were not just about the choices he made, but about the mindset he carried forward. The stranger had given him a perspective that had freed him from the confines of his own limiting beliefs. "I still have a long way to go," the man said, his voice tinged with humility. "But I know I'm on the right track now." The stranger smiled, as though he had been waiting for this moment. The journey never really ends. Every day is an opportunity to grow, to learn, and to evolve. The important thing is to keep moving forward, no matter how small the steps may seem. The man sat in silence for a while, savoring the peace that had taken root in his soul. He knew that life would continue to throw challenges his way, that there would be setbacks and moments of doubt. But he also knew that he was no longer defined by the need to prove himself, to chase after things that brought only temporary satisfaction. He was learning, slowly but surely, to embrace the things that truly mattered: connection, growth, and peace. As the night wore on and the Cafe Tilde copyright began to empty, the two men stood up, ready to part ways. The stranger smiled once more, his eyes reflecting a quiet understanding. "Keep going," he said softly. "You've got this." The man nodded, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. He turned to leave, stepping back into the world with a new understanding, knowing that the road ahead was his to shape, not by the things he owned, but by the choices he made and the person he chose to be. And as he walked through the quiet streets, he realized that he had finally found his why, and not through external success, but through an inner peace that had been waiting for him all along.